The graduation dinner at Chateau Bellevue was supposed to be a celebration. My cousin Miriam had just completed her MBA at the University of St. Gallen, and Aunt Sabine had spared no expense for the family gathering. The private dining room overlooked a calm lake. The menu featured dishes whose individual prices exceeded the weekly grocery budget of many families, and the guest list spanned 3 generations of the Kaufman family. I should have simply been happy for Miriam. She had worked hard for her degree, landed a position at a prestigious management consultancy, and clearly stood before a bright future. The problem was that every family gathering had long since become an opportunity to dissect my life choices and find them lacking. Miriam's starting salary is 135,000 euros, Aunt Sabine announced proudly, raising her wine glass, plus a signing bonus and full benefits. A real career with real prospects. Appreciative murmuring and sincere congratulations went around the table. Miriam smiled modestly, though she was visibly pleased with the attention. At 25, she embodied everything the family considered success. Prestigious education, corporate job, clearly mapped advancement path. I sat at the other end of the table, quietly eating my fish and listening to the familiar rhythm of family expectations. At 28, I was the one who disappointed everyone by choosing a different path. "And what about you, Lena?" asked Uncle Marcus, turning his attention my way with the slightly forced enthusiasm. "Relatives reserved for family members, they consider failures. Still busy with your little projects?" The little projects reference made me smile inwardly. That was how they had described my work for 6 years, ever since I had declined the corporate offers after graduation that had impressed them so much. "Keeping busy," I replied diplomatically. "With what exactly?" Aunt Sabine pressed, her tone suggesting she already knew the answer and that it would not meet her standards. "Last I heard you were doing something with computers." "Digital transformation," I clarified. "I help companies optimize their technological infrastructure and investment strategies." Miriam leaned forward with genuine interest. "That sounds fascinating. What kinds of companies do you work with?" Before I could answer, Aunt Sabine waved dismissively. "That's one of those internet things. Websites and apps and whatever. Not a real business." Uncle Marcus nodded knowingly. "The problem with that industry is the lack of stability. Today's technology is obsolete tomorrow. You need something with a solid foundation." "Like hospitality," Aunt Sabine added, gesturing to the elegant dining room around us. "People will always need places to stay, real service, real experiences. That's why our hotel chain has been profitable for 14 years. She wasn't wrong about the profitability. Kaufman Hospitality, GmbH, had grown from a single boutique hotel into a chain of 10 properties spread across German-speaking Switzerland. Aunt Sabine had built it methodically, focusing on business travelers and wellness weekends in mid-sized cities, impressive work, and genuinely successful. What she didn't know was that I had been studying her business model for years. Not out of family loyalty, but because Kaufman Hospitality represented exactly the kind of traditional industry that technological disruption could transform. They had built their success on information asymmetries, location advantages, and service differentials that were becoming increasingly obsolete in the digital age. "The key," Uncle Marcus continued, "is building something tangible: hotels, restaurants, hospitality venues, things people can see and touch. Real assets," Aunt Sabine agreed, "not computer files that could disappear overnight." My cousin Tobias, Miriam's older brother, joined the conversation from across the table. "Lena, don't you think it's about time you considered a more traditional career path? You're almost 30. The comment stung, even if I didn't let it show. The assumption that my age somehow invalidated my choices was familiar territory in family discussions. "I mean," Tobias continued, "what's your 5-year plan? How do you build wealth and stability with internet consulting?" It was a fair question, delivered with what seemed like genuine concern. Tobias worked in real estate, owned a house in the suburbs, drove a Porsche, and embodied everything the family considered responsible adult life. "Those are important considerations," I agreed, not wanting to start an argument at Miriam's celebration dinner. That was when Aunt Sabine delivered the verdict that would change everything. She set down her wine glass with a definitive click that always preceded her most authoritative pronouncements. Her expression was patient but firm, like a teacher explaining basic concepts to a struggling student. "Lena, my dear," she began in the tone she had perfected over 14 years of family gatherings, I think we all care about you too much to keep pretending this is working." The table went quiet, sensing that something significant was about to be said. "You're smart," she continued, "but you're living in a fantasy world. This whole entrepreneur thing, the technology consulting, the flexible lifestyle, it's not sustainable." Uncle Marcus nodded supportively. "Sabine has built a real business. She understands what it takes. The hospitality industry requires serious capital, operational expertise, regulatory compliance, staff management," Aunt Sabine explained. "Real entrepreneurial skills that take years to develop." She looked around the table, gathering support from relatives who had been having similar conversations about my career choices for years. "What you're doing is not entrepreneurship," she concluded with absolute certainty. "You're just playing pretend. Stop playing pretend entrepreneur and get a real job like normal people." The relatives nodded in agreement, their expressions mixing concern with the relief that someone had finally said what they had all been thinking. Miriam looked uncomfortable, probably wishing her graduation dinner hadn't turned into an intervention about my life choices. I simply said, "Good advice." The conversation then moved on to other topics: Miriam's apartment search in Zurich, Tobias's real estate projects, plans for the family vacation. I continued eating quietly, participating when directly addressed, but mostly listening to discussions about career paths and life plans that seemed to make sense to everyone except me. After dinner, I congratulated Miriam privately and drove home to my modest apartment, thinking about Aunt Sabine's comments. The phrase about playing pretend echoed in my head, along with the certainty in her voice when she dismissed everything I had worked toward for 7 years. What she didn't know, what none of them knew, was exactly what I had been building during those 7 years of playing pretend. It had started in my final year of university when I developed a simple app for managing study groups. Nothing revolutionary, just a tool that helped students coordinate schedules and share resources. But it taught me about user experience, market research, and the gap between what people say they want and what they actually use. After graduation, I turned down corporate job offers and used my app development skills to begin freelance consulting. Small projects at first, helping local businesses build websites, optimizing their online presence, developing simple software solutions for operational problems. The work was interesting and profitable, but more importantly, it gave me insight into how traditional businesses operated and where technology could create efficiencies. I began recognizing patterns across industries, understanding how digital transformation could unlock value in unexpected places. By year 3, I wasn't just building websites. I was analyzing business models, identifying investment opportunities, and developing strategies for technology-driven growth. The consulting work was funding a much larger project, building an investment portfolio focused on companies transforming traditional industries. By year 5, that portfolio was worth 15 million euros. By year 7, it had grown to over 180 million. And as of this month, my technology-focused investment portfolio was valued at approximately 680 million euros. My family knew nothing about this, of course. Why would they? I lived modestly, drove a reliable but unremarkable car, and talked about technology consulting in vague terms that didn't invite detailed questions. My success was built on understanding market dynamics they dismissed as fantasy, investing in companies they didn't comprehend, and generating returns from businesses they didn't consider real. The morning after Miriam's graduation dinner, I was reviewing portfolio performance when my investment manager called. "Good morning, Lena. I wanted to discuss the positions in the hospitality sector." Caroline Fisher had been managing my investments for 4 years, ever since my portfolio had grown beyond what I could handle personally. She was brilliant, discreet, and completely focused on results rather than explanations. "What's the situation?" I asked, even though I suspected I knew where the conversation was heading. "Several of our positions are underperforming projections. Traditional hotel chains, restaurant groups, hospitality management companies. The sector is facing significant headwinds from technological disruption." I pulled up the relevant files on my computer, scanning performance data for companies I had been tracking for months. The numbers told a clear story. Traditional hospitality businesses were struggling to compete with platform-based alternatives that offered better pricing, more flexibility, and superior user experiences. "What's your recommendation?" Divest the entire sector, 680 million euros in holdings, representing about 43% of your current portfolio. The capital could be redeployed into growth opportunities in fintech and sustainable technology. I looked at the list of companies we would be selling, noting which ones supplied services to Kaufmann Hospitality GmbH. Aunt Sabine's business was built on relationships with exactly the kind of traditional suppliers and service providers that were becoming obsolete. Execute the divestiture, I decided. Full liquidation by end of week. All 680 million, all of it. What I didn't mention was that divesting the hospitality sector would do more than simply improve my portfolio performance. It would also eliminate funding for the suppliers, service providers, and business partners that companies like Kaufmann Hospitality GmbH depended on for their operations. Carolyn handled the logistics with her usual efficiency. By Wednesday, every hospitality-related position in my portfolio had been sold. 680 million euros shifted from traditional hotel and restaurant companies to technology investments generating 20 to 30% annual returns. The market reaction was immediate. Thursday morning, Aunt Sabine called me for the first time in months. "Lena, I need to ask you something strange." Her voice was tight with a kind of stress I had never heard from her before. "Do you know anything about investment funds or institutional investors?" "Some," I replied carefully. "Why?" "Our suppliers are having problems. The linen service company, the food distributor, the maintenance contractors, they're all saying they've lost major funding and may have to reduce operations or raise prices." I made appropriate noises of concern while opening my laptop to check the specific companies she was mentioning. Every one of them had been part of my hospitality sector holdings. "It's strange," she continued. "It's not just one or two companies, it's as if someone pulled funding from the entire industry all at once." "That does sound unusual," I agreed. "Kaufmann Hospitality depends on these relationships. If our operating costs increase by 20 or 30% because suppliers are struggling," she didn't finish the sentence, but I understood the implication. Her profit margins would disappear. Friday afternoon, the situation escalated. "Lena," Aunt Sabine's voice was barely controlled panic. "I need help, professional help. Do you know anyone in finance or business consulting? What's happened? Our bank called. They're reviewing our credit lines because they're concerned about hospitality sector stability. 3 of our major suppliers have filed for insolvency. Our insurance company is raising premiums. It's as if the entire industry is collapsing." She was right, of course. When institutional investors withdraw 680 million euros from a sector, the ripple effects can be devastating. Companies that depended on that funding for operations suddenly couldn't meet payroll, fulfill contracts, or maintain service levels. "Is there anything I can do to help?" I asked. "I don't know, maybe. You said you do technology consulting. Do you understand financial systems, investment analysis, business restructuring?" It was an opening I had been waiting 7 years to receive. "I have some experience in those areas," I said. "Would you like me to take a look at Kaufmann Hospitality's situation? Would you do that?" "I know we have. I know the family hasn't always been supportive of your career choices. But I'm desperate. I don't know who else to ask." Sunday afternoon, I met Aunt Sabine at her corporate headquarters for the first time since my university days. The Kaufmann Hospitality GmbH offices were modest but professional, a reflection of her pragmatic approach to business development. She had prepared comprehensive financial statements, operational reports, and strategic analyses that demonstrated both her business competence and the seriousness of the current crisis. Kaufmann Hospitality was genuinely successful, but it was also completely dependent on industry relationships that were dissolving in real time. "The numbers look solid," I told her after reviewing everything. "But you're right about the sector-wide problems. Someone did pull significant funding from hospitality investments this week. Do you know who?" I considered how to answer that question honestly. I have some insight into the institutional investment patterns that caused this disruption. "Could you help us navigate it? Maybe find alternative suppliers, restructure our service contracts, identify new funding sources?" Possibly, but it would require significant strategic changes. Kaufmann Hospitality would need to embrace technology integration, digital transformation, and operational efficiency improvements. Aunt Sabine looked skeptical. "You mean the internet stuff you've been working on?" "Among other things, yes." She was quiet for a long moment. weighing pride against necessity. What would that look like? Over the next 2 hours, I walked her through a comprehensive restructuring plan that would modernize Kaufman Hospitality's operations while preserving the service quality that had made them successful. It was technically complex, operationally challenging, and entirely feasible with proper implementation. "This is sophisticated work," she said finally. "Where did you learn business analysis like this?" 7 years of technology consulting taught me how traditional industries can adapt to digital disruption. I've helped dozens of companies navigate similar transitions. And you think this would work for Kaufman Hospitality? I think it's your best option for surviving the current market conditions. Aunt Sabine gathered the documents I had prepared, her expression thoughtful. "Lena, I owe you an apology. What you've shown me today, this is not playing pretend." "No, it's not. What would you charge for consulting work like this?" I smiled, thinking about her comments at Miriam's graduation dinner just 1 week earlier. "My standard rate is 220,000 euros for comprehensive strategic restructuring." Her eyes widened. 220,000 euros? Plus equity participation if the plan succeeds. Usually a 5 to 10% ownership stake. You charge that much for technology consulting? I charge that much for saving companies from industry-wide disruption caused by institutional investment withdrawal. The irony hit her all at once. The pretend entrepreneur she had dismissed was now offering to save her business from the very market forces I had helped create. "The investment withdrawal," she said slowly. "Do you know who was behind it?" I looked out the window at the Kaufman Hospitality building, thinking about 7 years of family gatherings, where my career had been dismissed as fantasy, while I had been building a portfolio worth nearly 700 million euros. Someone who understood that traditional hospitality businesses were vulnerable to technological disruption and decided to reallocate capital toward growth opportunities. "Do you know this person personally?" "You could say that." Aunt Sabine was quiet for a long moment, processing implications that extended far beyond business restructuring. "Lena, exactly how successful has your technology consulting been?" "Successful enough to fund strategic investments across multiple sectors, while maintaining a primary portfolio value of approximately 680 million euros. The silence in that room was complete. 680 million euros? As of Friday's market close. And you're offering to help Kaufman Hospitality survive a crisis that your investments, that my investment strategy inadvertently created? Yes. Aunt Sabine looked at the strategic analysis I had prepared, then back at me. Why? It was a fair question. Why would I help fix a problem I had caused? Why would I offer consulting services to save a business owned by someone who had spent years dismissing my career as playing pretend? Because Kaufman Hospitality is a good company that deserves to survive industry changes. And because your family, even when you don't understand what I do for a living. She was quiet for another moment. What happens if we don't implement these changes? Honestly, Kaufman Hospitality will probably fail within 6 months. The supplier disruptions, increased costs, and credit challenges will eventually overwhelm your operational efficiency. And if we do implement them, you'll be better positioned for long-term growth than you have ever been. Technology integration done right doesn't eliminate the hospitality experience. It enhances it. Aunt Sabine gathered her papers with movements that seemed automatic, her mind clearly working through calculations that went beyond financial projections. "The family dinner last week," she said finally. "Yes, I told you to stop playing pretend entrepreneur and get a real job. You did, while you were sitting there controlling nearly 700 million euros in investment capital. That's correct." She laughed suddenly, a sound that mixed embarrassment with genuine admiration. "No wonder you just said good advice and didn't argue." "There didn't seem to be much point in arguing. How long have you, since when have you had this kind of money?" "The portfolio reached 100 million euros about 3 years ago. It has grown considerably since then. And you have,